Okay, so we are here for Ask Me Anything. This is really weird when I read this because I read my name myself, which is weird, but it's not for me. Louis, I have been using Figma tokens plugins, but I heard rumors that Figma is...
Question one.
Question one. I've heard rumors that Figma is going to release its own native token feature soon. Can you share some details?
No, next question.
Ooh.
Yeah, of course. Of course. I think the rumor is probably put to bed. We've been very vocal about something like that being worked on. Just to give you some context about product process, I suppose, this has been being worked on for probably 3 years already. And the branching feature was probably worked on for 3 years as well. Interactive components was in beta for an entire year. These things take a very long time to produce. So firstly, thanks everybody for your patience on whatever this becomes. But actually, to answer the question, the design tokens their goal is to be agnostic and to be platform agnostic, where you can use something that gets pushed out into many different platforms. We have the same thinking, thankfully. And in a really positive news, there's a community group that is working on design tokens from the W3C, design tokens module format. Just follow that guide as closely as you possibly can, because we are following that guide too. So follow the guide. Get yourself set up. And this is actually more of an engineering question, to be honest with you. It's less of a design question. That's why it's sort of systems thinking in its core. Follow that module, set up a JSON file, and you should be fine.
So,
but actually, just to sort of extend that a little bit, design tokens are really, really fucking hard. So don't expect that whenever something gets released, it's a switch that you turn on and you're ultimately going to have a design system that is successful. It's the start of another 6-12-month journey. So to get yourself set up ahead of time, follow that format, get your module formats in place, set up your own internal variation of whatever this format looks like, and test it out and see what happens. On the Figma side, honestly, it doesn't really matter, because this is more of an engineering problem that we need to solve first. On the design side, I don't really care how many design library files you have, as long as it's working for the consumers of that file. So have one token file, one style file, or 10, or 500. Use the tokens plugin if that works for you. But aside from that, work alongside that format that is being published, which is still in a work in progress, by the way. So they still haven't entirely figured it out, just to give you an indication about how hard the problem this is to solve.
So that was not one of the yes or no answers, basically?
No.
No. Okay. It's not going to be under your Christmas tree, but keep working. So excellent. Thank you. The next question here is there a roadmap or plan in the works to make Figma more accessible? A truly accessible collaboration tool would be game-changing. Oh, it's a bit of a burn in that question as well, isn't it? Just, you know.
The short answer is yes. The long answer is we have an internal committee, an accessibility committee, which was established earlier this year, who are working on things like this. We released a beta feature recently for more accessibility navigation within prototypes themselves. And that's just one of the first steps that we're looking to take to make that more of a thing. As you can imagine, this is also very difficult. One of the benefits of Figma as a product when it first started, that it was collaborative by nature. And that was because of the platform and code-based choices that we made 10 years ago, which was to build everything on WebGL. WebGL is amazing, but it's not HTML. So now what unfortunately we have to do is retrospectively build HTML into WebGL to enable you to have things like tab order navigation within your prototypes. So that's why this is kind of unfortunately complicated, is because the thing that made Figma successful in the first place is now making it quite hard to retrospectively make web-based products. So accessibility is a thing that is being figured out. And the dark mode that was released 6-9 months ago was one of the first steps, hopefully an indicator to show you that from the back end, we're actually working on that on our own products first to dog food the ideas. And then we'll ultimately, over the next year, 2, 3, 5 years, roll out more of an accessible product itself.
Excellent.
Okay. I think the small wins, as Jan mentioned earlier, are color and type size. The Figma product itself does not have very good color contrast. We're aware of that. And the main font is in 11 point. So it's quite small, quite gray. It doesn't really work against the white background that we initially set up. So those sorts of things are initially being worked on as part of a larger UI refactor itself, which then feeds into a larger project of accessibility.
Small steps, get in there.
As everything.
Excellent. Good, good. We actually have another question about future plans as well. It's going to be a lot of those, I'm sure of it. Is there a future plan to introduce documentation tools natively to Figma?
This is one of those questions that I'd like to have a conversation with the person who asked it. So
and you know what? I know who's met. I actually know who asked this question, so he's not going to get away from it. No, it wasn't me, but I think we have the gentleman here at the front waving at us.
Yeah. The question back really is, what is documentation to you? I could probably guess, but it'd be great to hear in your own words what that means.
We've used tools such as Zero Height and things like that, and I was wondering if, since Figma is already agglomerating a lot of tools into itself, if documentation wouldn't be one of those.
Yeah, I don't think we should do that. We probably will, but I don't think we should, because nobody reads documentation. That's why I speak to customers every single day who have invested years into custom-built public-facing documentation websites that don't get read by the design team. They might be like a marketing, branding, business objective to sell that value of the design system. But then you find, firstly, they don't get read because they're out of date. Somebody has to be then sourced on to maintain that documentation. That's a really important point, to firstly validate whether you need a site or anything in general, or you focus on solving that business problem of like what we're there to do. Back to the actual question. I'm seeing a lot of design teams bring documentation closer to the component. So navigating the canvas with, I'm sorry, I'm speaking very loud in it. Navigating the canvas with text alongside the components that says, this is what this means, this is why you should use it, these are the guardrails of that component. And it's clunky and it's not very sexy, but that's what is being most successfully implemented at the moment. So is that a documentation tool? I don't know. We released the find function recently, which allows you to a lot easier navigate the canvas itself. So if that's any indication about what you might be allowed to do in the future, yeah. What we're kind of thinking about at the moment is, how can you navigate component libraries easier? At the moment, it's very difficult to find and see components in their context. Where is something being used, who's using it, and basically the visual representation of an entire library file. How could that be more visually mapped out for a user to see all the components, possibly in a folder format or a tree architecture? That's where we're kind of thinking at the moment. But traditional documentation, I actually don't know if we want it.
Okay, thank you.
Until somebody says it's useful for them.
Thank you. And until that, there are tools to use such as Zero Height and Supernova.
Well, they offer different versions of documentation, but I think the traditional essay writing of a single atomic component, I think is out of date.
Yeah.
I think it's all about context and the decisions you're making, rather than describing something that kind of everybody should either know or should be owned by a different team. People mention Storybook a lot for front-end engineering, and that does an awesome job of allowing engineers to own the documentation. So why would we want to separate and have two versions of documentation in multiple different places, managed by different people on different budgets and timelines and resources? What's the middle bit? And I actually don't know if designers should be owning the documentation, because ultimately the source of your product is the live product. So why are the engineering team not owning that? And these are sort of discussions I think we should be having internally to work out where, why, who, what, how of every single thing we're doing. Is Storybook enough? It might be. So let's not recreate everything in Figma. Let's push our designers to learn a bit more about the engineering side. Again, not really a yes or no answer.
You're doing great. Don't worry. It's all good. It's very good answers. So thank you so much for that question. Next question is there what is the best course or resource to learn design system end to end, on one that shows how to fully utilize the latest updates to Figma's components, customization and functionality? I might have to read that again.
I think that's probably 10 questions.
Yeah, I feel like that as well.
In one question. My question firstly back would be, do you really want to do that? It sounds like you need to hire 100 people for learning an end-to-end design system process. So let's try and break down what you kind of want to do. I'm presuming it's coming from a designer who's asked that question. So what does a design version of a design system look like? That's probably the UI kit version of a system, or the components side of it, or the styles, or the accessibility, or the content. And these could be spoken about for 10 minutes each as well. But honestly, if you're a person looking to learn about how to structure things, which I think is the most important part of a UI kit anyway, recreate something. that you like. I know that people really hate when case studies are, here's my favorite app and I've redesigned it. But I do think that's actually very useful to learn structure and architecture of anything. Let's maybe not use Twitter. Take Mastodon as an example and take their homepage, make it better and redesign it or recreate it inside a design tool of choice. And you will learn very quickly how to architect components, how to learn about spacing, how to learn about typography, and based off the decisions that that person has made. Once you've done that, you can think about the architecture of your files and your libraries and your components. And that's going to take you months to do probably if you want to do it well. So that will in itself teach you about libraries, components, styles, file architecture, publishing, release management, versioning, implementation. And they're basically all the things you're going to need to know to build a design system. So recreate something. It doesn't really matter what it is. Probably the simpler, the better. Maybe take a single component. Take a form, because unfortunately most designers are just designing forms all day. Take a form and try and recreate that in your design tool in the most effective way as possible. That will teach you everything you need to know about building an end-to-end design system from the design context. If you think about engineering, you're going to have to learn how to code. That's going to take you a decade. So think about how you can partner with somebody to maybe implement that version of your idea from the design side.
The answer is basically there is no shortcut.
There is no shortcut.
You got to get your
systems.
hands dirty, and you just got to get the work done.
I know that people like me talk about design systems a lot as they're like an easy thing to do, but it's really not. So that's probably first ask yourself whether you need to be doing this. Does your team need a design system, or does it need to sell a product first? And once you've had product validation, then you can start thinking about that design system itself. But yeah, the end-to-end side is something that Google haven't even figured out. So I don't know if a single person is going to be able to do that over a weekend. So it's just break down every single thing into a chunk and work out how you can manage that yourself.
Excellent. Another question. Figma allows to import React components. Is it possible to create a full UI app as a designer without the dev work, so UX designers can deliver the app? Is this a yes or no question?
Let's just not do that. We don't want design tools to export production code. We think we do, but we definitely don't, because there's just no way a design tool could have the resourcing to tail chase the latest versions of React, Angular, Vue, raw JavaScript, HTML5, CSS3, and every single platform that needs to be supported on the planet. It's just not going to happen unless you have an unlimited budget. So getting to a point where you maybe export a landing page that could work might be something you want to do. You might be able to export a HTML structure that is suitable, but still, that's not really a product. So if you want to get to a situation where your design app is exporting functional, accessible, semantic React code into an app format, it's never going to happen. That's only thinking about the designers. If you're thinking about the engineering side, every single engineering team I've ever spoken to has a different way of working, a different way of naming their components, a different way of structuring their files. We're not going to be able to match that either. So the goal here is basically to reinvent the entire industry, which we just can't do. So I think we need to accept that creating products takes time, and the current tool landscape makes it very easy to think we can get ahead of that a lot easier, but we still need to take the time to produce quality product if we want that as our goal. If we don't, there's plenty of plugins that allow you to export HTML and CSS from any design tool that you could push to a GitHub repo, host it for free, and have a website up. Is that okay? It might be. I use GitHub Pages a lot myself for any landing pages that I want to spin up for free very quickly. The code's absolute trash, but it serves the purpose of what I need to do at that moment. That's still not a product. Product needs a lot more than what a design tool can provide right now. This is why we need to think on the other side. Do we want to sit more in the engineering? What frameworks can we use from an engineering perspective to spin up products a lot quicker? Things like Tailwind, as an example, might allow us to do that. Material, as an example, might allow us to do that a lot quicker. That's not a design conversation, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Okay.
Am I being opinionated enough?
I'm looking for more opinions. Don't worry, okay. I've got more questions.
Okay, let's go up.
I've got more questions for you. Is there a plan for introducing a concept of templates in Figma, similarly to how they work at FigJam, especially allowing to create your own custom ones?
This has been a question that has been asked probably weekly to me since we released the concept of templates in the product. And the answer is still no, unfortunately. I'm trying to bang that door a lot, and this is being recorded, so this is our feature request. Any feature requests you have, go to the support channel, because we do pay attention to support. That gets logged in an Asana board, which then gets prioritized and built. So any feature request, put it into that support channel for sure. To get around this, I would always so if you're working on the org or enterprise plan inside of Figma, I would create a team for that design system as a first step anyway. Have a project called templates, invite everybody as a viewer, set up those core templates, duplicate and drag into your team that you need to work from. That's the only way you're really going to get around it at the moment.
So whoever asked that question, get to that support channel, put that in there. Will you consider bringing GIF exports of prototypes directly to Figma? Please, smiley face. I didn't add that. That is the question.
That's another really common one, and the answer is probably. I think that it's just, anytime we think about a feature like that, we need to think about not shipping something. And I would prefer to work on something like conditional logic of a prototype rather than exporting in GIF format. But it will eventually happen, absolutely. That's just not on the immediate roadmap. So what I would do if I wanted to record a prototype was open QuickTime, record it, run another program called GIFski, GIFski fan over here, and then convert that to a GIF and use that one. I think there's enough workarounds at the moment to make it okay that it's not a top priority.
Hot tip. Excellent. Thank you. Figma and Storybook. What are the future plans?
Am I the CEO now? Storybook's open source, firstly, unless you look at Chromatic, which is a charged, understandably, platform that they are running on. Figma, you can embed in Storybook, if that's the question. I don't know what much more we can do. But I think there's a question behind the question of integrations. And yes, there's work being done on integrations deeper into the product. How can you make APIs more accessible? How can you allow developers to build what they need inside the product? That's happening behind the scenes. So yeah, there will be a deeper integration, but you're probably going to have to build it yourself.
Okay.
Which is actually related to the question earlier about code export. We don't want to support every library to export. We want you to be able to export to your naming conventions and your platform. So if you want to think about it that way, how can we as a product enable you to be more successful with your custom integrations rather than trying to predict what you may need?
Okay. Integrations, you mentioned that. Someone's got a question here. I just want to point out that it doesn't say will, it says when. When. Are you ready for this? It's a good one. When will Figma start integrating AI?
What?
I mean,
like what AI?
I don't know if you have the person who asked the question in the audience, because this is an anonymous question, but
yeah, it's by an AI. This is written by a bot.
It's an AI who wrote it.
When will Figma integrate AI? Well, if we're going to be practical about this, there's a company called Diagram who just raised a lot of money to build AI design tools. They're working on the Figma platform. So it's already kind of there. You just, as I said before, you need to build it yourself. You need to define what AI means to you. If that is generating icons, or if it's generating imagery, or naming your layers, or naming your components, or whatever, you can build your own algorithms and build on top of the Figma API platform itself right now. So when is it coming? It's kind of already here. We're just not necessarily going to, again, predict what you want to ship a feature that may never get used. And that's probably a useful philosophy just generally, is giving people the tools to build what they need rather than trying to say, use this thing in our way. Yeah, AI is a thing. You can do it. I'm not sure if I would say it's useful, but it's definitely possible at the moment. I think we don't want to take away the craft of the design process. And craft is a disgusting word. I know, I'm ashamed to say that.
I've got a couple of more questions. I've got a really big question that I'm going to save to them because it's such a good question. But in the meantime, can you explain? Sorry, I lost it here now. It was a very good question. I'm going to find it here, so bear with me 1 second. Oh, this form is all over the place. Can you explain FAFO to us?
Oh my God. We've got a troll in the audience.
I think it's the AI troll again.
Jesus Christ. I actually don't know what it means. Fuck around, find out? Is that what it means? It's a deep design philosophy from the 1400s that Aristotle invented, which was actually AI proven.
Brilliant. I'll take that answer. I'll take it. So if somebody wanted to get into, okay, so this is actually a serious question. So this one.
That wasn't serious?
No, it was absolutely a serious question. This is another serious question. If someone wanted to get into design systems, what would you recommend that they would learn first?
I think I answered this earlier with take a product, recreate it in your design tool of choice. What would you learn first when somebody wants to get into design systems? I think it's probably too early to think about design systems if you got that question. It's more about how can we deliver value to our customers, and the design system is going to be part of that conversation. It's not going to be the conversation. Design system, the challenges you find when you're trying to get into let's build this thing is you're then creating a problem for yourself of having to validate that decision itself. Whereas I think, so Morgan was answering the question earlier about having something that's lasted for 8 years. How do you validate it? I was like, well, you've already done it. You've already built the thing, and people now see the benefit of that. The challenge we face if we say, I want to build the things, people can say, no, you don't. You're not going to support you for that. A design system naturally is going to be built over time and incrementally, just like any other thing in design is going to be done. Animation, prototyping, you don't just launch the prototype. You need to incrementally introduce that as a concept, educate people, and then roll those out as ideas to be tested and validated, similar to the design system. So I've also forgotten the question. When do you want to start a design system? Is learn the fundamentals of just building product. Product needs systems underneath it to make it work. And just speak to your developers. They're definitely going to be using a framework of some kind. And if they're not, you're in trouble. But they're definitely going to be using a class naming convention, a framework or some kind, which you can learn from. Go and sit in their sprint planning meetings, sit in their retrospectives, sit in their daily stand-ups and just learn what they're talking about. And you're going to understand that system probably exists already. And then you can start to think, how can we retrospectively fit that into the work we're doing at the moment, if you need to. There's no reason why your design and engineering components should be named the same if they have different purposes and if they have different users. If your design team is made up of people who have absolutely no idea what HTML is, don't call your components something very hyper-specific because they're not going to be able to find it. Your adoption is going to be 0%. It might be useful just to describe those things in a lot more detail, which is probably not what you'd say is best practice, but the adoption rate will be much higher. And over time, you educate those people to learn why it's called a picker instead of a drop-down, because it's semantically important. Instead of jumping ahead to the finished result, let's try and get there over time.
And if you want to learn a little bit more where to start on design systems, there are loads of great communities that you can join and go to. This being one of them. Just going to take a moment here to plug ourselves as well.
I think that with anything in design, the easiest way is to fuck around and find out. And just go and play.
Beautifully done that. Beautifully done.
Planted it very well.
Well done. Well done.
You're not going to learn unless you try it out. And I think designers are fortunate to have that buffer in their day job to experiment and learn on the job. And that happens, as I said, incrementally over time. There's not going to be an end result immediately.
I'm going to move on to the next question. I need to grab the iPad for this one because hold on tight, people. This is a long one. Okay. Will it be possible to let elements wrap to the next lines once the max width of the parent container is reached by using auto layout? Will it, Louis?
The next version of auto layout is being worked on at the moment.
Okay.
But if you want to play funky with this one, the width of something can also be tokenized. So maybe that's what's happening somewhere.
I think actually that's all the questions we have on here. Oh, actually, I do have two questions. I have one question. What does a product designer role at Figma look like? I know you're not currently looking for people, but just like general, what does a product designer role at Figma look like?
I typically say that a designer at Figma spends more time in Dropbox paper documents than inside of Figma, because it's all about the communication of your ideas rather than the pixels that are on the page. And I'd also say that the Figma design system is not the best design system you've ever seen, because it works. What we typically have, as you can imagine, every single person in the company has editor access on the product, which means that that is opened up to who can collaborate on anything at any time and who can contribute to any design at any time, which means that you get engineers designing, air quotes, product managers designing. The other day I saw one of our product marketing managers playing with component props, and that's not what you typically see from a product marketing manager somewhere else. So we typically have a creative-minded employee base, but because everybody can access and change things, that naturally means that you converge on what design looks like. A product designer is deeply focused on, firstly, not shipping a product that's not ready or not finished. So deadlines can be wavered if it's right. Spend a lot of time doing chatting with customers and just learning and paying attention and having our ear to the ground. Figma is very fortunate in that people will tell you what they want, aka this list of things, rather than having to ask for it explicitly. That's a challenge in itself. If you're thinking from a product mindset, you don't want to listen to the loudest minority people. So that is a balance that has to happen. There are separate product processes that handle with that. But a product designer typically gets put into I don't want to use the word squad, but squad, for want of a better word. And they work with PMs and engineers on a specific feature or track. So the product is broken down into prototyping, design systems, editor, FigJam, growth, enterprise, and things like admin management. So a designer will be put into one of those groups, mobile as well, put into one of those groups, and that's what their focus is from a product perspective. So we have designers specifically on prototyping. They become nerds about prototyping. Engineers also, PMs also, and we hire specifically for those roles. So somebody is not working on everything inside of Figma. They're working on a particular part of it, which, as you can imagine, introduces challenges, because if you've got people really focused on one area, that there needs to be a communication channel to another area, so there's not breaking changes across the whole platform, which probably means that having a looser design system is actually more beneficial. The second point I want to make is that everybody says they want to work at Figma and work on Figma, but I actually would challenge people to think whether they do want to do that. Because if you think about the product itself, it's basically a couple of side panels, right? Or some panels that pop out. Do you really want to be working on a really heavily gridded, less visually artistic product? Yes or no? Are you a systematic kind of thinker? If the answer is yes, that might suit you. If you're somebody who wants to work on branding and like add confetti to everywhere, then Figma's probably not the product that you want to work on. So a product designer focuses on features within larger features, I guess, because they're not individually built. So somebody would be working on auto layout, specifically, the next version. They might also be working on branching at the same time, and they typically work on sort of those larger epic features over many, many, many months to make sure it's correct. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. It's not an uncommon setup on many product companies, so good to hear. Again, I'm gonna go into the live audience here and see if anybody has mustered up the courage to ask a question like, oh, we have someone. Fantastic. We have someone coming with a microphone. Okay, there we go. I think we got it right here for you. Go on.
Thank you. It's a similar question to the AI one, but I'll elaborate it a little. We are seeing a lot of tools trying to integrate AI in some way or the other in their tools. So recently we saw Notion coming up with Notion AI, which allows you to write prompts and help you with the copy that you're writing in Notion, because mostly you're writing something inside Notion. I think it's good for documentation where it creates an outline and then you can start tweaking it or expand on it. We also seen Descript come up with an AI feature where it allows you to create a storyboard, which makes it easier to edit the video, even if you're not a video editor professionally. And then I think Pixel phones, they also always detect whether your picture needs some kind of modification. Like you might have taken a picture, it might need, it could look good in portrait mode, or it could have people removed from the background, and the phone is automatically going to tell you that that picture could have that removed, and do you want to do that? And you just say yes, and it removes that. So it feels like magic. And this is not necessarily you applying something on top of the product and saying, hey, AI, please do this. It's like they have integrated it in a very nicer way inside the product, so it feels like the product is doing something magical. I would have asked if Figma is planning to do something like this, but I would change the question a little. Louis, what do you think? How can Figma leverage AI to do something like this? I'm sure there would be ways that you could improve Figma, right? By trying to integrate AI in some way or the other.
The goal, I think, of those tools is efficiency and reducing waste. The question we probably need to ask ourselves is, if we increase efficiency and reduce waste, are we okay with the potentially losing our jobs? Because we're removing ourselves from the question as a dramatic answer to that question. And the answer is obviously no. But I think what we could definitely increase efficiency of is things like prototyping and things like exporting, things like conversations and communication. At the moment, you're having to jump through a bunch of different tools to communicate your decisions and your ideas. Not that that's an AI problem to solve, but it could eventually be communicated via a descriptive language that we are suggesting. From a prototyping perspective, absolutely, we don't want to be drawing noodles across 500 frames every time we need to make a change. How can we communicate that to something that says this to this over the whole document, please? And it just kind of knows. That's the kind of level I think that would be appropriate and supported. When you get down to things along the lines of naming your layers appropriately and naming your components and all that sort of thing, I just don't know if that's a useful use of time. I think that there are other things to be worrying about on the more production side, and the design tool should always be the ideation platform to create new things, to the point where, very factually, the longer you spend inside a design tool, the further away you're getting from a product. And the more time we bake into AI into something that isn't production code, I think we're wasting time. That's just my opinion, but I think that, sure, there's optimization efficiencies that we can bake into any part of design. It's things like the admin side of design is probably where you want to start, on the operational side of where does the file live, what is it called, who's owning it, can we automatically invite the right people to the right files, can the permissions be set based off the project or the goal that you have? That sounds logical, but to the point of the actual moving things around a screen, I'm not sure if the gains are going to be marginal enough, firstly for the investment, but secondly for the benefit that we'd get in the long run. I'm not saying that, and I'm speaking in a very functional way, so I'm thinking about systems and components and styles. Artistically, different conversation. That's where you start to get to those diagram magician tool where you say, I would like a ballerina in France on ice, and it generates you loads of different stylistic choices of that imagery. That kind of makes sense, but also, is that artistic or not? And this is a sort of a wider problem with sort of art and AI more generally that I don't think I'm well equipped to answer. And it's whether we'd be comfortable with that. I remember a few years ago when every single illustration style was the same and everybody used the same unsplash photos. Would AI actually solve that or not? I'm not sure. It might make it faster to find it. It might make it faster to find the same photo, but you're still going to have the same photo in the end. And I just don't know if that's a benefit we want to investigate.
I like the idea of getting the admin and org part sorted out, because I think that's one thing that I want to spend the least time on.
And I think that would be a real tangible
value
saving of cost.
Yeah. Do we have any other live questions? We have time for one more live question if we have any other. Okay. If we don't have that, I have, since you were talking a little bit about, you were talking about art and AI and whatnot, it felt quite sort of a big question. So I think this is not my question. Somebody has put this question in, so I am just putting this caveat on here. I think this is an excellent question to end with. Louis, what is the meaning of life? And Figma. So that's important, that last bit. Meaning of life and Figma. This is your closing question for today.
Spend less time in design tools. Seriously. Don't get to a point where your entire personality is your design career. It's really not healthy for you. Don't get to a situation where you don't take vacation. It's really not good for you. Take more time off. Spend less time thinking about design, and you're going to become a better designer. Not speaking from personal experience.
I agree with you. Spend less time doing work and more time doing life.
Go for more walks.
Yeah. And if you end up having had too many holidays that is left by the end of the year, consider doing a 4-day week for the rest of the year. Speaking from my own experience.
I did that last year.
Absolutely amazing. Best thing that ever happened to me. That's all we have time for on this seminar. I know this was a brave decision for you to agree to this, but I think it went well. Well done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
A round of applause.